Hello and welcome to the webinar, Understanding Your Permanent Kids' Needs. My name is Courtney Williams, the host of America's Kids Belong's FosterCon webinar series. And we are in the middle of our Understanding series. So this is one of many in this series of different things that we need to understand as foster parents. And one of them is if you are already a parent, before you start fostering, there are a lot of needs of your permanent kids. So whether biological kids, adopted kids, kids who are already in your home when you start fostering, there are just things that we need to consider. This is something that's near and dear to my heart as we started fostering after we already had kids, even took a little break from fostering multiple times for our kids' needs. And you're going to listen to a great conversation with a couple of people. What we decided to do for this webinar on our Foster Friendly podcast, we have interviewed 3 people who have talked on this topic, and they were just great dynamic conversations. And so we decided to take those podcast episodes and turn them into a webinar so more people will hear them, and also so that you can get your CE credit if you need them. More about the CE credit at the end of this webinar. So buckle up, because you are going to hear from, like I said, 3 individuals. You will hear from Ayla and Eli Williams, who are actually 2 of my 9 children, 2 of my 3 biological children. Eli is our first child. Ayla is our second child. So not the oldest kids that we have, but they were our first and second children that we had. And they're going to just share at the time of this recording. Eli was 18, I believe, and Ayla was 16, about 6 months ago now. And again, just hearing from them and their hearts and their experiences, I think you'll take a lot out of it. And then Daniela Coates, she is also foster and adoptive mom, but she was a bio kid in a foster home growing up, and she shares her experiences as well. So again, this is taken from 2 of our previous podcasts. If you don't already listen to our podcast, I encourage you to go check it out. It's called the Foster Friendly Podcast. So I will let you listen to these interviews and take notes if you need it. Record the screen if you need to, push pause at any point, journal about it, whatever you need to really just take notes and dive deep into understanding how we can support our permanent kids. Today, I'm joined by 2 of my favorite people on this planet. Eli and Ayla Williams are 2 of my 9 children. And we, as a family, we initially got licensed when Eli was a baby, but we really got worried that it would ruin him and his life. And so we didn't take any long-term placements. We took our first non-respite placement when Eli was about 5 years old, and we've been licensed ever since. You could say truly that these 2 have grown up as foster siblings, and I know that they have a lot of insight to share to you. And a lot of people have fears around their biological kids and what it'll do to them, just like we did. And so I hope that you enjoy this conversation. Eli just graduated high school in December, and Ayla is a junior in high school. So Eli and Ayla, thanks for joining me today. Okay, so I love the looks that I get when I'm trying to explain our family to people. Actually, my husband and I just celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary, and we tell people that we've been married for 20 years, that we have been together for 22 years, and our oldest is 23, who was not with either of us before we got married. So people always kind of give us quite the look. They don't understand. But Eli and Ayla, you were our first 2 children of 9. You're not the oldest children, but you were the first of our children. So Eli, can you explain that a little bit further and tell people the makeup of our family?
Yeah, sure. So we have a family of 11, 9 of us kids ranging from 23 to 4. I have siblings from Ethiopia, the Congo, and siblings that we've adopted through foster care in Denver. Through the last, I think, 14 years, my mom was telling us this morning that it was then that we had our first placement. So we've been able to give a house to over 60 kiddos, and it's been really special for that.
Yeah, so it's kind of fun to explain again. So Eli, Ayla, and Owen, our third bio child, are right in the middle, and then 3 older adopted kiddos, 3 younger adopted kiddos, and then 3 dogs and many other kids that come and go all the time. Also, Eli, it's kind of funny, when we first started fostering, we were not taking any long-term placements at first. And from that to our first placement being girls who were older than you at the time. And we had said we were not going to take any long-term. We were definitely not going to do older than you. And then our first placement came and they were older than you. Do you remember that first placement, and what do you remember about it?
Sure, I do remember it actually. I was young, so I don't remember a lot of it. But I do remember thinking, I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like 2 teenage girls, it kind of felt like, oh, this is, felt special. The experience itself was new. So at the time, like knowing what I knew, like what I know now, it's definitely a lot different than what I saw and experienced when our first placement walked through the door. Like, I didn't really know what was going on. Still very new, but yeah, I do remember it was very special. And I think it's pretty cool that even after all these kids and all these years later, I can still remember who they were and a lot of things we were able to do that weekend. So
That's great. Yeah, Ayla. So we had those two sisters. We've had a lot of pairs of sisters for some reason, but we had those two sisters that were our first placement. And then about 5 years later, we had another pair of sisters who just really tugged at all of our heartstrings, and yours particularly. Tell us a bit about those two and what was the hardest part about fostering them.
Yeah, so we had two girls, Brooklyn and Mari. Brooklyn was 3 and Mari was 5. Big personality girls, super sassy, lots of energy, but we loved them a lot. The hardest part was I went to camp. It was during summer that we had them. Went to a summer camp, and while I was at camp, they had left to go back with their mom. And I came back, and they had already left, and that was just really hard not being able to say goodbye because those girls meant a whole lot to our whole family, and me especially, just being able to be with those girls and then not being able to be with them when they left.
Yeah, that was a really hard thing. I remember years later, like talking 4 years after they had left, one time I looked over and I saw you and you were kind of looking sad. And I was like, Ayla, what's up? What are you thinking about? And you said, I'm just thinking about Brooklyn and Mari and how I never got to say goodbye to them. And again, that was like 4 years after this had happened. So I know it definitely does emotionally pull at your heartstrings, and it's hard. It's not always easy. But you two may not know it, but one of the most common questions people get or responses people say to me when I'm talking about foster care, they have questions, is they say, hey, I'd really like to get certified, but I'm not going to because I have kids at home. And again, I don't want to ruin them, or I'm worried they'll get hurt, or I'm worried that it'll be too emotional for them. So I know that there's been a lot of heartache, like you just explained that situation. And there's been a lot of hard times over the years. But when we moved to Colorado, so we fostered in North Dakota for years, moved to Colorado over 6 years ago now. And my husband and I, we were like, you know what? We've done enough of this. Kind of felt like we had done our time. We're done fostering. But Ayla, you actually wrote us a letter. And that letter you left on our pillow one night, and you got, at that time, we had 7 kids. So you got all 6 of your siblings to sign the letter saying, Mom and Dad, you had told us this was a calling in our life. I still have this letter. I should have pulled it out, but you were like, we're all willing to share bedrooms, or willing to share our toys. And did God take this calling away, or are we still supposed to be doing this? We all think we should still foster. And again, you got all your siblings to sign it. And so we decided to get licensed again once we moved to Colorado. So Ayla, what was it about fostering that made you want to keep doing it? Why did you write that letter, if you remember, all these years later?
Yeah, I do remember that. It was a few things, actually. For one, I have always had a huge passion for kids, love kids, being able to pour into them, love on them, being able to watch them grow. And also, after doing foster care for a while, I don't know how long it was before that, but I knew the need for foster parents and knew what it took to be a foster family. And knowing that there was a need, just there was no way that I felt like we could quit. And also knowing that God had called people, us, our family, to foster care and care for the orphan and the needy was just something that I feel like was something we couldn't stop.
That's great. Eli, you too, you are about to fly the coop. You just graduated. You're going to be joining the Marines and leaving this summer. What would you say, as now a just graduated senior? I mean, I still call you a senior, but just graduated young adult. What would you say that foster care has taught you about life?
I think all my siblings and my parents would admit that when it comes to patience, it's pretty slim. Like, it takes a good day for me to even have a little bit of it. But by doing foster care and, adopting and being able to be in those situations, there have been a lot of good conversations where it's like, even you, Mom, a kiddo walks the door, and it's like we'd sit down and have that conversation. Eli, ahead of time, this kid's been through a lot. He's seen things you haven't seen, had to go through things you haven't gone through. And so I think that's what it's taught me is patience, one, but then also just realizing that you can look at people and automatically think a certain way about them without even knowing their story. So I feel like that's another huge thing I'll always take with me, whether I was going to the Marines or not, but especially going into the Marines, knowing that it's like I'm going to be dealing with different people on a daily basis. So knowing that, everyone's gone through their own tragedy, their own thing, but let's all work together and see if we can't make something beautiful. So yeah.
Thanks, Eli. One thing that people don't know just by looking at you two is you two are, yes, Eli, patience is not your greatest virtue, but you do have so many great qualities. And one thing about both of you two that other different people throughout our lives have said to us, these two are both so compassionate. And that is one thing. We have a little family motto on the wall. And one thing is we say, like, we are going to be passionate family. But you guys had the same third grade teacher back to back. Again, years ago when you guys were small, you had the same teacher back to back, Mrs. Del Padre. And Mrs. Del Padre, after she had Eli first, of course, and then Ayla. And after Ayla was in her class, she came to me and she said, I've now had two of your kiddos back to back. And they both are some of the most compassionate kids I've ever had in my classroom. And she said, if somebody's hurt or somebody just looks sad, like they're the people that just jump up and they want to go help. And she looked at me and she goes, what are you doing at home? I have grandkids now. And I want my daughter to teach my grandkids what your kids had. And I kind of sat there for a little bit and I was like, what? I don't know. What are we doing? And it dawned on me. It was like, it's foster care. It's what Eli just described is these kids come from all over the place. Most of them have gone through really hard things and they're going through loss. They're going through trauma. They're grieving. Some of the abuse stories that we've heard that Eli and Ayla, we try not to share too much with them, but then kids will share stuff, right? And you guys hear just these stories that have got to make you look at life differently. Like you, again, Eli just described. And that's what Mrs. Del Padre saw in you too. She saw something that was different. And again, for me as a mom, when people ask me that question, like, hey, there's something about your kids. Again, the answer is foster care. Foster care has taught you guys how to love people in a different way that Dad and I could teach you how to love people, right? But we couldn't do it if it wasn't in our home to the depth that we've been able to. Changing story, it's changing gears just a little bit. Let's think about okay, you guys are foster siblings. I'm foster mom. I'm your mom. We get a phone call. Typically it's me that gets a phone call. I get a phone call about a placement and kind of share with the listeners, what does it look like then? Okay, mom gets this phone call. Usually I call dad next, right? And then what kind of happens after we get that call for a placement?
Sure. So, I know for me, most of the time throughout the school year, Ayla or I will have sports. We're all big into sports. We usually come home and it usually happened on a weekday evening. I don't know why, but that's kind of the timing of it. So most of the time we'd come home for our respective sports practices and, mom and dad would be like, hey guys, kind of call us all together, let us know the situation. We're having this kiddo, this old, this is how we're going to accommodate for them here in our home. This is where they're going to sleep. If they feel comfortable, they'll tell us all a little bit of the story, maybe some us older kids, a little bit of what this kiddo's had to go through and how we can best love on them. And then after that, it's, we welcome the kid as they come in and just try to make them feel at home. Most of the times it ends with like a movie night or kind of a fun night, just to kind of break some of the ice. And it works really well with good systems.
So can you guys say one thing that you didn't share that I think Dad and I have done pretty well is we pretty much always, if it's an emergency situation, we'll often take kids in for our night or 2 nights, and those ones we don't necessarily ask permission. But if it's a long-term call that we're getting, hey, this kid needs a placement, a long-term placement, do you guys agree that we always ask you guys your opinion about it before we just accept a placement?
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. Always.
Yeah. And for people that are listening, I think that's just a really important thing. Not that our kids rule our house, but especially now that we're at therapeutic home, we get a lot of teenagers. And so we always want to sit down our teenagers, all of our kids, but all of our teenagers specifically, and say, hey, this is the placement. This is where they, like Eli said, this is where they'd be staying in the house. This is the, as much of the situation we feel comfortable sharing with you guys. And then we say, are you guys comfortable with this? And by comfortable with that, we mean we don't want to take a placement and have them be in our house for a month. And then we say, well, sorry, our kids don't like this. So they got to go on and find another house now, right? That just adds to their trauma. And that's one thing we've tried to do. We've only one time so far in our 17 years of fostering have we said a kid had to move to another place because it was just really hard on the family. That doesn't mean we've had great placements or easy, I shouldn't say great, they've all been great, easy placements since then, right? We've had a lot of really hard situations. But again, as a family, it's like, this is something we agreed to. And unless there's a real deep reason of why they can't stay, like the young boy that had to move on, it was kind of silly on our part for saying yes to begin with because we had just adopted our youngest at the time and we were transitioning to a new home, all that. And then he came and had really high needs and was physically abusing our kids. So there are times when it might be best to say, like, and we said, we just don't feel like we can provide this kid the best place that he needs right now. And we were able to follow up and we saw that he went to a therapeutic home at the time, went and lived on a horse ranch. He got great healing, was adopted by that family. So he had a great end of the story, but it is hard. And again, we don't want to add to that trauma. So again, for us, a big part of it is we have kids. If you're listening to this and you have kids, that's one thing you can take away, is to make sure you ask your kids their thoughts and their feelings about a placement before you just say yes to anything and everything.
And if I can't add, I do remember it happens a lot. Another thing that I've really come to appreciate as living in your guys' household is you and Dad will always sit us down and, make sure we know. Eli, this isn't Eli and Ayla. You guys are our two kid drivers in the house right now. This is not going to be easy because, they might have appointments you need to go help them get to and from. And, you guys really do make a point. So I think that's good to make sure the whole family knows, like, hey, these are the expectations and the needs. Like, this is something that's going to have to happen. It's not something that might happen. And let them know this is a whole family ordeal ahead of time, and there will be sacrifices that be made, sacrifices that are worth it.
Yeah, that is a great manner. We have a large family to begin with, right? So I often will rely on Eli and Ayla to help, especially with our younger kids, like take them someplace while I take the foster youth to an appointment or to visitation, or sometimes we've had times where they're just having a really rough day and the kids just need to go to the park or go be somewhere for a while to get out of the house. So like, yeah, again, Eli, we have leaned on you guys and we appreciate you guys more than you guys know. Okay, so going back to that first, so we get that call, we chat with you guys, kind of what Eli described. Then Ayla, what's it like those first moments or hours or day when a new kiddo walks through those front doors? What is that like for you as a foster sibling, and what does it kind of look like?
Yeah, at first, everyone kind of meets the new foster kid or kiddos. Usually my youngest sister is all over them, so it's kind of like trying to make it as less overwhelming as we can. Give them space, kind of show them where they're gonna be staying, and kind of give them the rundown of the house, meet our pets, maybe see if they want to play a board game or something while whatever meal is being prepared. Like Eli said, we usually just do a movie night or get pizza or something. Yeah, in the first few days, you're kind of just like getting into the flow of it, like of what it's like to have another person around the house, what the needs are, what the schedule's going to be like, and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, people ask me, that's a question I get to, like, what's it like those first minutes, those first moments? And for us, we've never had a placement where we didn't already have kids. And so it's an easy transition to, we kind of let you guys do that work. And that sounds not because we don't want to give our time and our energy, but because kids are drawn to kids, right? And kids make kids feel comfortable. And so you guys actually, believe it or not, take the big load off of Dad and I when a new kid or teen shows up by just taking them around, because again, they feel more comfortable with you than they're going to feel with us in those moments. And it is a beautiful thing to see you guys giving them a tour of the house. And the board game is often a thing like, hey, do you want to play a game? And most kids have some game that we have that they love. And so they'll just sit down and play a game together. And Dad and I kind of take that step back and we're there, but we're kind of watching and listening and interjecting as we need it until we can tell, like you can just tell in a person's countenance feel comfortable. And so we will, once we see that they're more comfortable, then we'll kind of dive in and start talking about more logistics of the house and stuff. Okay, so we are not going to pretend that this is all peaches and roses, especially on you guys, on us, on our family. It's not been an easy thing. It's been very hard emotionally and physically, spiritually, like all the stuff. We have been attacked by many different angles through fostering. And there's just a lot that goes into it, a lot more than the general public, I think, really recognizes and sees and knows of the pain and the hurt and the good and that, all that goes into our family on a day-to-day basis. And so I'm sure there's been times when you guys have been like, I just wish that we'd stop fostering, or I wonder what my life would have been like if Mom and Dad we'd never adopted or we'd never done foster care. But I know that there's also, and you guys have both told us in your own words at different times, like how much you appreciate this life and how thankful you are. And I know you guys love your adopted siblings so much. But Ayla and Eli, but Ayla, you go first. What would you say the hardest parts of fostering?
Yeah, I think there are a few. As mentioned before, sometimes it's saying goodbye. Like, you get attached, you love on these kids, and then they go back to their parents, which is really the aim of foster care. But sometimes it is really hard to say goodbye. And other times it's just like emotionally draining. Sometimes you don't want to have to entertain the kids anymore. You want to be able just to go in your room and read a book, be by yourself. So sometimes that's hard too. And other times it's hard to, yeah, it's just like hard on your family, on how they treat people in the family, and how just ways to like navigate that. So that's hard too sometimes.
Eli, what would you add?
I mean, I also wrote down saying goodbye, but apart from that, again, like I'm very slow when it comes to patience, so a lot of times it takes uh my mom, even when there's, kids have been through a lot. So there will be times when, kids are raising their voices and kids are uh not in a sense,
Cussing,
they might be, yeah, they're having a little bit of
cussing,
a
punching
breakdown.
walls. You can say it, Eli.
Yeah, yeah. But it's just like those are times when it's like I like look over at my mom, I'll look over at my dad, and it's like, do you do something? What are you supposed to do? But it's in times like those when it's like, you know, it's it's times like those when you really need to realize, this kid has been through the ringer, and this is all he knows. And when people are starting to love them a lot of times, it's pretty new to them. I love them in the right way, at least. When they break down, it's something that you just need to continue loving them through. And for me, that's difficult, but I know it's also difficult for a lot of people. When you're getting yelled at, when you're getting um, insulted, and
Phones
just
taken.
phones, yeah, like it's hard to love people through that. But I think it's just another one of the very valuable lessons, and um, good things that foster care teaches both you and your family.
Yeah. So speaking more onto that, Ela, how have Dad and I helped you guys through a hard placement or a kiddo that you just really struggle to connect with in the moment, or just through that placement?
Sure. I remember. So I like video games, for instance, and we've had a few teens in the house that like video games is all they play. And I'd say my younger brother Owen and I, we love being outside. We love doing those sorts of things. All of us do. But even you guys encouraging us, like, hey, we usually only allow X amount of time on TV, but let's connect with this kid and meet him at his comfort level and build that friendship. And then even after doing that, it was like taking a step back and approaching him, and that way we were able to blossom a pretty good friendship with that foster kiddo, and that was a lot of fun. I've never played so much Mario Kart in my life, but it was worth it.
Ela, would you add anything?
Yeah, I would say sometimes you guys even just sit us down when you guys can tell we're having a rough day and just kind of remind us like why we do foster care, and you guys encourage us like, yeah, you guys are doing a great job, and I know this is hard. Sometimes they'll give us days off, like just go in town, go be with your friends, go have a sleepover, go take some time to yourself, just whatever. You'll just give us some time away and really encourage us.
And vice versa. Eli kind of alluded to it. We've had teenagers, and not teenagers, but usually teenagers in our house who have thrown stuff at us, cussed at us, not allowed us to like move further because they're going to stand and not move, things like that. And one thing we know is the kids' behavior, and I think we've done well to hopefully of teaching you guys a little bit what we may haven't told you guys the word TBRI, but trust-based relational intervention, of how to connect with kids, and there's a reason behind their behavior. And when a kid is doing that, they're really telling us something. They're telling us they either need something, they're sad, they're thinking about something. There's a reason. They're not just standing in the doorway and not moving because they want to make the Williams family mad, right? They're doing it because something in their body is off. And I think we've hopefully explained that well to you guys. But even in the moment, sometimes, Eli, you specifically, again, patience isn't always your virtue, but you have sometimes stepped up to be able to say, when there's a teenager, they're just screaming in my face and telling me off and talking to me in a really inappropriate way. There have been times when you've stepped up and you just stopped and stood kind of firm, not touching them, but stood there and be like, you will not talk to my mom this way. And I think sometimes when you guys step in like that too, it's probably more meaningful than you know, because they're like, oh, this is a peer telling me this, not just Courtney telling me this. This is a peer telling me this. And I think they take that differently when they hear that from you. And not only when they hear that from you, but the other thing, and I get this, like our caseworkers tell us all the time, we have a placement right now that is a teenager, and our caseworker always says the best thing for this kiddo has been in a home with solid teenagers who are teaching him what it should be like to be in a family, what it should be like to love his mom, what it should be like to be part of a family and help with chores and clean up and these things. And it is like you guys are a huge part of the equation of our foster care journey. And I hope you guys really see that and understand that, especially when we got those hard kiddos and the kiddos that maybe are a little more hard to connect with, or the same age as you. I think I was telling somebody else this recently that I feel like probably the hardest thing like I said, Eli, we fostered and adopted out of birth order. We adopted kids older than you. We fostered kids older than you. And I think it's safe to say, Eli, you can disagree with me if you want, but that hasn't ruined your life. In fact, you were the one that kind of asked us to adopt older kids. But the one thing I've noticed is, not for our family, I'm not saying this is every family, but for our family, it hasn't necessarily been birth order that has been the hardest. It's been when we have a teen or a kid that's like the same age and the same gender as one of our kids. So like Ayla, I know we had a teenage girl before we moved, our most recent move. She was like the same age, a girl, shared a room with you. And those seem to be the hardest ones, is when it's, again, the same gender, the same age as one of our kids. Birth order doesn't seem to matter as much, but that seems to be really hard. Would you say that you agree that those have been kind of the harder placements, is when it's a kid that's, you know, the same gender as you and the same age as you?
Yeah.
But I also think that placement, again, I remember there were some times where you would get frustrated because she really liked to be in her room, and which was your room. And so you would often come out and you'd be like, Mom, she's taking over my room. Right. And that would happen. And you had to learn how to do that dance. She was with us for 4 months. It was a temporary placement. We knew she was moving on to an adoptive home. So you knew it was temporary. And I think that helped as well. But there were also some really sweet moments. I don't know if you remember, but there were some times when you guys would be up so late at night talking. And I would say, Ayla, you're making her stay up, or you're not making her go to bed. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. You guys should be in bed at 10. And you would say, but Mom, we were having the most meaningful conversation, or we were having a really deep conversation, or she was really struggling today and I was really helping her. Again, I don't think you two realize how much of a difference and an impact you've made on these kids in just staying up past hours, even if it's breaking the house rules or being on video games longer than we would typically allow, just connecting with them. So thanks for all that you guys have done. So you guys are both young. I mean, you probably feel old, but you're young and have a lot of life plans, goals already, but easily life plans can change. Eli, I'm curious what you would say. Be honest. Do you plan to be a foster parent one day?
You know, that's something that, you know, I was actually thinking about when I was reading through some of the questions you were going to ask us today. And I was like, you know, I've always said I would love to adopt, but I think for a lot of people, you know, it's easier said than done. Especially when thinking about going, like, things are getting real. I'm shipping off for boot camp in June.
Well, let's pause. I'm going to ask you that question again, because do you know how to put the dad's computer on Do Not Disturb? I thought I did it, but
Yeah, go up here. Push this thingy right here.
I'm going to make a little note that we have to
And
pause
push
here.
focus. And then do not
I just think
disturb.
it was really loud right in the middle when you started to
Yeah, I
talk.
kept dinging a few times. All right.
Okay, so I know you guys are both young. You probably feel like you're older than you are. I mean, you know how old you are, but you probably feel old. You're like mature, but you still are really young relatively in life. And I know you both have life goals and life plans, but they can easily change. Sometimes you think at your age you know exactly what you're going to do, and then it changes. But I'm just curious, if I were to ask you today, I am asking you today, Eli, do you plan to be a foster parent someday?
Sure. I think the most simple answer to that question is I'd love to. You know, I've seen what it has done in my life and my family's life. I've been able to make good friends, and, you know, I'll still walk through the halls of DHS, and, you know, we'll have a place and walk up and be like, hey, how are you doing? And we'll just be able to, you know, it's deeper than just a friendship. You know, you're actually like a brother. You're actually family to me for a long time. So, like, yeah, short answer, I'd love to. But I think what you and all the viewers would admit, it's like, you know, it's a lot easier said than done. Because especially going to the Marines, there's a lot that entails with that. Now, looking into the future, like I said, I'd love to. If the Lord allows me and makes that available to me, 100%. I'd be all in to do that. But yeah, it just completely depends on where I am in, you know, 20 years. So
I'm not gonna lie, that answer shocks me. I was expecting to ask this question, and I was expecting to get a no and a yes. So we'll continue this conversation.
I'll be completely honest with you. When it comes to foster care, for whatever reason, it's kind of like, you know, I'm a little more hesitant towards it because, you know, like I've said 3 times now, I'm not very strong in the patients department. So without people around me who can really help me, being able to actually be the parent in that situation, it'd take a lot. But adoption is definitely something that I could see myself going full into. So
Okay, Ayla, let's see if you surprise me too. right now in life see yourself fostering someday?
100% yes, I do. It's definitely something that I want to keep doing for the foreseeable future. I want my kids to be able to experience it the way we have, to be able to learn these life values, how to be compassionate and patient, and how to get along with kids and even get along with the kids' parents. To be able to grow friendships and relationships through it is something that I want to keep doing, and something I want my kids and my family to someday be able to do too.
That answer didn't surprise me. Okay, I know I've already said it, but really, I hope you two know that you have made a lasting impact on many, many, many children and youth. Quite frankly, I would say as much as Dad and I have. In fact, when people ask us, "How have you guys kept fostering so long? This has been years, and how do you keep doing it?" All the time, 100% of the time, my answer is Jesus, but our kids. Our kids are how we've kept fostering because, again, you guys help us so much, and hopefully we don't lean on you guys so much where you feel like we're just draining you, right? But kids, again, make kids comfortable, make kids sad. Like, you guys have the ability to relate with them at a different level than Dad and I can, right? That, again, the impact that you've made, the friendships that you've made, the brotherhood, the sisterhood that you've been able to form with them is just super special, and it is how Dad and I can say yes. Again, we ask permission, we take breaks, we do the things that we need to as a family, but you guys are what keep us going, and you guys are really great kids. So before we finish this, one thing I want to share, I wasn't planning on sharing, but I want to share this little story because I think it's, again, for those of you that are listening, maybe that aren't foster parents, but to just know how you can make an impact on the kids that are already in the home. People ask us, like, how can we support the foster youth? And that's great, right? Or their bio mom, or you as the foster parents. But people often overlook you guys. Like I said, you guys give so much of your time and your energy and your bedroom space and your toilet, like all the stuff. You just give and give and give. And I know Dad and I get worn out, so I know that you guys do too as well. And last year we had our first therapeutic foster placement. It was a really hard placement, and the placement left right at Christmas break. So Christmas break rolled around, placement leaves. We were going to North Dakota we're going to be there for a week. The day we got to North Dakota, we found out that my brother-in-law was in a bad situation, and he was coming to live with us with his two little kids who didn't know English and just were very needy at the time. And so we actually had to leave our Christmas break early. Just got done with the therapeutic placement, thought we were going to get a break. We left Christmas early. We did Christmas and left immediately to come home and then care for two little kids that needed so much of our time and so much of our patience. And I was super sad for you guys because I felt like you guys needed a break. You and me too, but I was like, my kids need a break. And I told some close friends that this was the situation, but I didn't tell them like, oh, my kids need a break. And I did say I'm sure I said something like, I'm just sad. Like, we had to leave Christmas early. And we had two of our closest friends, Josh and Jinya, they called and they said, we are going to come pick your kids up and we are going to take them on a 4-day trip to Moab. I want you guys to just tell, because in that moment, honestly, probably the sweetest thing that's ever happened to me as a foster mom. And again, it wasn't foster, it was kinship, but it was still like we were drained from fostering. And to have them come to our house and pick you four up, four of our kids, our four oldest that were at home at the time, pick them up and take you guys on a 4-day trip. What did that mean to you guys in the moment? And what was needed of you after that long fostering journey? And then now we have two little kids running around our house.
I think, well, I was just more excited to go to Moab. I didn't even realize it was more of a break. To be honest with you, I just thought it was kind of them just offering, hey, let's go to Moab. I've always wanted to do this. Let's do it because I love off-roading and whatnot. So, but thinking back on it now, that's definitely been like, I still think about the trick. I'll have like the memories pop up on the phone, and it's like, oh, that was so cool. But I do remember, well, just looking back now, especially, it's like, it's pretty special to have friends and family and people like that in your lives who, even though I didn't see that was a break for me and my siblings, but, they recognized the need and they were right there to step in. So the importance, even though when you asked me earlier, hey, are you willing to do foster care? It's like, it's going to be hard if I ever do it, especially for me. But looking around and realizing, I have friends and family who would in a moment, set down their everyday lives, their needs and their plans, and be, we're going to wrap around you and we're going to help you, because not only helping you, we're helping this kid. And at the end of the day, that's what's most important.
Yeah. And for us as parents, and again, if you're listening and you're not a foster parent, but you can support a foster family in that way, like our kids need those breaks. Our family needs those breaks. But I love the people. I'm sure you guys have had people ask you guys before, like in the middle of a placement, like, hey, Eli, how's it going? How's it going with so and so? Or how are you doing? Mom and dad hopefully ask you those questions. But when you have a mentor or somebody from church or somebody that's close to us ask you that personally or take you out to coffee, I'm sure that it's just a different feeling of appreciation and feeling like I'm feeling seen and valuable in the situation by people outside of my family. So a huge thing, again, that you can do if you're listening is to pay attention to the bio kids, the kids, not even just bio, but all of our kids are adopted kids as well, right? The kids of the foster families who are already in the home, who are giving so much, and think about ways that you can support them and rally around them as well. Okay, we're about to close this off. One question we like to end with is asking people this question. So I want you guys to both finish the sentence. Eli, what kids in foster care really need is
Family.
Simple as that, or do you want to expound on that?
Simple as that. All I need is people who love them and will love them and surround them like family, so they ultimately can go back to the family that they have. That's all I need.
And part of that, Eli, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm challenging you because I think you kind of said this in your answer too, is a lot of people will say, what kids in foster care need most is love and just leave it there. And I always tell people it's not all they need. They don't just need love, right? But family are used together. Family makes mistakes. And these kids need to see, again, like you said, like their goal is to go back home with their family. And so if their goal is to go back home, we're going to teach them how to be in a family healthily and responsibly and all the stuff that goes into being a family. And that includes the bad stuff, right? We do have kids that come into our home that think, oh, you guys are a perfect family. And then we pretty quickly show them we're not a perfect family. Like there's no such thing, right? We argue, we make mistakes, we make each other mad, but hopefully we also show them how to repair those mistakes and what it looks like when you're arguing and now you come back together. So they learn how to do that.
100%. I think even just a recent example of that is, our last placement actually ended up being, especially to me, like, we're still friends. Like I said, passing in the hallways at DHS, and it's like, how are you doing, man? But, towards the end of that, beginning, it's just all argument. Like it was hard in the beginning, but towards the end, he'd come home and, we were friends. I could tell when he's having a bad day. And instead of going to his room, again, we both liked video games. And so I'd turn on the TV and let's play video games and talk. And so towards the end of that, it was like, he was even open enough to show me, he's like, dude, like, thank you. He did thank me. And then he just said, a lot of those kids haven't had someone who's really willing to sit down and ask them the questions that they're begging people to ask them, like what's going on, like what can I do to help you? Even the question of why was your day so horrible, like what happened today and how can I help you with that? So for him, that was the family, that is the family aspect. It's not all giddy and all that. It's all about when they come home or when they're having a rough go at it, that you still wrap around them and you still show them you might be used to being alone, but now you're not alone. And so I think that's what family's all about.
Ayla, how would you answer that? What kids in foster care really need is?
I would say for you to get attached, for families to wrap around, not even families, but friends, community, teachers, but also just going back to love them enough to hold them accountable, to set them to standards, not standards that you wouldn't set your other kids' standards to, but standards that will keep them accountable and like to help them get good grades, to help them grow, to help them eventually get back to their family, to help them make connections and stuff. So I think it goes against what a lot of people say is like, what if I get too attached? But no, that's what they need.
Thank you guys. Wise kids. And your kids. Eli, I know you're 18, but you're still a kid to me. You always be my kid. My first baby. Eli, if someone's listening who has thought about fostering but has been hesitant due to their children at home, what encouragement would you leave with them?
I get this question all the time, actually.
Do you really?
I don't tell you and Dad this at all, but I think it was just the other day. I had one of my good buddies, Ridge. He reached out. He's like, dude, like, what's it like having siblings that are older than you, or having adopted siblings older than you, foster care siblings that are older than you? How is that not hard? And I said, whoa, man, like, this is hard. Probably the hardest thing you can put your family through, honestly. As plain as it gets. The thing that I think Ayla and any other foster sibling would say is, these are my brothers and sisters at the end of the day. I'll have people come and ask me, like, Detronage, like, how was that adopting? How was it adopting them? Are you asking me if I regret having my older siblings? Like, they're my best friends. They're my brothers. Like, I wouldn't trade that for the world. And for what? For being the oldest in the household? For having people that aren't your biological siblings? I feel like a lot of times we can get stuck, like, caught on that, where it's like, we miss the biggest point where it's like, no, this isn't a curse. It's one of the greatest blessings. And like, looking at people who ask me this, like, a lot of times we'll kind of end in like, man, like, thought about it like that. It's like, just go and ask anyone. Like, don't be afraid to ask, because it's a good question. Don't be afraid to go ask people that. But I love that question because it's always a look on people's faces when it's like, sometimes they'll ask a question that they don't realize is so black and white to the people who are actually going through something like that. It's like, this is my family. These people, my family. Even if they're foster placement for one day, that's someone that we can now, like I said, I'll keep using. I walk by in the community, and it's like, it's deeper than just a friend. It's deeper than just a quote unquote foster kid. It's him. We've shared something. We've probably shouted at each other and gotten arguments that, even me and some of my siblings haven't gotten into. And it's a bond that you, like you said, kind of like quote unquote sisterhood or brotherhood. It's like that. It's, you walk around, it's a connection that's deeper than a lot of people see or realize. And so if people are doubting, what are my kids at home? Again, like I said, it's hard. People ask me that all the time. It's caused pain, it's caused heartache, but it's caused growth, and it's caused, like you said, a deeper bond with people around you, and a whole mindset. It's caused me to, be able to go out into the world and see it in a completely new light, because these are all people around us that need help and need love and need the kind of being able to be wrapped around. And the only way that you can do that is through loving them like family. And that's what foster care and adoption provides. So.
Thanks, Eli. Those of you that are just listening, you can't probably know, but I'm actually crying because this is the question that it hangs people up so much. And I could look at our family and again, point out all the heartache and the hard things we've gone through, but it has been such a beautiful journey. And people ask me all the time, would you choose it again? And it's hands down, yes. This has been a hard, beautiful, wonderful journey for our family. And, we don't go out, we don't continue fostering. We haven't adopted to be saviors, to save people's lives, but we do hope that we have made a difference. And we do hope that we've changed their lives for the better, that we've shown them, again, that family is messy, family is beautiful, family is wonderful, but family's worth it. And hopefully they're willing to fight for their families as well, whether they're adopted, they're fostered, unified or not, their families in the future. We just want to show them something special. And again, you two have made that impact. Thank you for being here today. I am so excited about this conversation because I feel like this is a conversation people want to have. Mm-hmm. People fostering, people looking to foster care, they're often curious about their biological kids or the kids that are already in their home. So that's what this conversation is about. Today we have Danielle Coates with us. She is the founder of With Siblings, an organization that exists to support the birth children in foster and adoptive homes by equipping parents and professionals through training and resources. Her parents fostered when she was a child and eventually adopted her youngest sibling. Having grown up in a home that fostered and adopted, Danielle was a temporary sibling to many children. Now, she and her husband have children both by birth and adoption. Danielle is also a licensed master social worker in the state of Texas and is the author of a book, The Day Lily Turned Uninvisible, a children's book written specifically for biological kids in foster families. So thanks for joining us, Daniela. We are excited for this conversation.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here.
So Danielle, as Courtney mentioned, this is something that a lot of people are curious about. We both, Courtney and I, also have bio kids who have been foster siblings, and so we've lived through this. So just tell us a little bit more about your story.
Yeah, when I was 7 or 8 or so, my parents kind of brought forth this idea, like, hey, let's add kids to the family. And this is partly because of my dad's involvement with an organization that does like camps for children in foster care. And so he kind of saw the need in that way. And he was like, we've got to do something. And so my parents have a really big heart, and they decided we're going to go ahead and we're going to adopt. And that was the plan from the very beginning. And we went to that match adoption through foster care. And of course, that's a lot of hurry up and wait. So we did that. We waited for quite a few years. So when I was 10, the first set of kiddos came to live with us. Very long story there. We didn't end up adopting those kiddos. They ended up being placed elsewhere after they'd been with us for a year.
Mm-hmm.
But that was kind of the start of my journey. And we did take some time off because that was a really hard transition, because we had intended on adopting them and they had been with our family for a year. But so we took a little bit of time off, and then we jumped back in a couple years later and fostered for about the next 8 or so years. And then adopting my sister was at the very end.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay.
Man, a lot of that resonates with our own story. So tell me, as a bio sibling to all these kids that are in your life for a year or maybe just short term, do you have any favorite stories?
Some that are funny and some that aren't, and some that are sweet and some that aren't, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Sounds right.
What mood
Yeah.
are you in to tell?
Right, right. Yeah. What does the crowd want? A sweet story that I remember was when the first set of kiddos were with us, and I'm the oldest in my family of origin. I've got 2 biological brothers that are younger than me. And then when these kiddos came in, they were all younger than me. There were 3 of them. They kind of mixed ages with my brothers, but I was still always the oldest. And so there was this little girl, like a toddler. And I can remember one time I had my own room. We actually just moved from a northern state to a southern state. So the housing market was drastically different, way cheaper, way more house for I say my parents' money. It wasn't my money. Who am I kidding? So I ended up getting my own room. And I remember I woke up one day and I had thrown my, throw pillows on the floor the night before. And I woke up one morning and that little toddler had brought herself into my room and was sleeping on the floor next to my throw pillows just because she wanted to be close to me. She had her own room. She actually had her biological sibling in that room with her, but she wanted to be close to me because that was the relationship that we had. And so that's a sweet memory, that I have of that time. I also have other memories of lots of other things, but like really wanted them to lose this game of horse or like Yahtzee. Like, why do they always seem to win? I just want to beat them, So I mean, all that kind of stuff too. Tons of memories.
Yeah, it's funny, kind of that natural sibling rivalry
Siblings,
things.
right.
Yeah, we had a young man who was older than our girls. He was 17, and they were a few years younger than him. They would tease him about like, man, you need to take a shower, or knock his hat off his head, and it was all it was just like it felt so normal. It was
So lots of those.
Yeah. So, yeah, like you said, kind of the sweet stuff, the competitive stuff, the things the hard stuff. Yeah, that all feels like a lot of it's just kind of normal life, but some of it still is a little unusual because it's foster care.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Talking with friends or, who aren't on the foster care or adoption journey, you share something, and whether that's as a child or as a foster adoptive parent, you share something like, oh yeah, I have that too. And I'm like, not to this extent. You don't.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
There is some of it that is totally within the realm of like, we're just humans and we're just kids and we're just whatever. But there's also this uniqueness to it too.
Yeah, there is. And yet a lot of it seems, like I said, normal, but then intensified. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Daniela, this is like one of the biggest reservations people have. I get this question as a recruiter. I get 2 questions all the time. I could never do it because I'll get too attached, or what about my kids? Right. And so this is a topic that people just, again, want to know about. They want to hear people's perspective. They want to hear experiences. Sometimes it helps people kind of relieve that fear. Sometimes it doesn't. But you have a lot to say just because you have that lived experience. As I know my kids, as they grow older, they share with people a lot. People ask them questions. So just tell us a little bit more about you growing up as a foster sister. What was it like? What were some of the feelings that you had in that role?
Yeah. So it kind of depends. Like it's interesting because my story lasted for a long time as far as being a sibling to kids in care, because it was like, 8 or so years, really 10 years if you count from the very beginning to when my sister's adoption was finalized. And so from the very beginning, when those first set of kids came to live with us, that was probably the hardest season if I had to pick because I'm adjusting to a lot of things. These kids have moved in. It feels like my world's been flipped upside down. A lot of things, I mean, if you think about like, I mean, this would have been 20 years ago now. Trauma informed anything 20 years ago is not what it is today. So people just in general didn't quite understand as much now as they do, like in a societal level. But even just my parents didn't feel like they really actually knew what to expect. And they certainly didn't know what to expect for us. So that being said, these kids move in, and things like I tell this story sometimes where my parents did a visit with these kids first because it was an adoptive placement from the beginning. That was the intention. And so my parents met these kids first. And I remember my parents coming home and kind of telling us about how the visit went and sharing how when they were about to leave, one of the kids had said, "Hey, Dad, catch," and threw my dad a football. And when my dad shared that story, I'm like, "Excuse me? This is not your dad. You just met him. Like, he's my dad." And with that, and this is my story, but it extends obviously to birth kid, then becomes these questions of, well, if he is his dad, and if all of a sudden like the stranger can become a child, like what does that mean about my significance in the family? Am I significant then if a stranger can come in and just automatically be a child of the family when I've been here for 10 years? Like so there's kind of questions like, what is my role then, and how meaningful am I if this relationship is that fluid? So there were challenges there for sure of just, this doesn't feel right, this doesn't feel fair, feeling like I'm being replaced, I'm being pushed out. So it was a really hard season, and not just in our family, because my parents had their times of not necessarily responding the best, which they've reflected later, and said, "Oh, that was a point of regret for me. I shouldn't have responded that way." And I'm like, I didn't even remember that memory. You have it locked in your mind. You're holding the shame in that. I'm not holding any shame over you. Anyway, so just those kinds of challenges where we were really involved in our community. And I'm excited though. This is another piece I haven't mentioned. I'm excited. I am on board. Yes, let's adopt. I'm so excited to have a sister. And yet when I'm introducing them to friends or our community, all of a sudden things are changing where people are literally not saying hi to me anymore. Courtney, if this might remind you of some things maybe in a book. People aren't saying hi to me anymore. Like my dad has said he can remember when literally we're all standing there together. People walk up, greet the kids that are new to our family, and don't say a word to me, and then they just walk away. So like I was quite literally just feeling very invisible and forgotten in that initial transitional time. Now, they ended up leaving our home, and that was a lot of grief related to that because it's very unexpected in a lot of ways. We were trying to figure out how this, could work long term, and we were given a week, like, "Hey, you got to pack up their stuff. We're moving them somewhere else." And that was really hard as a kid too, of just like the confusion of how do I reconcile that? Like, yes, it's been really hard, but we've been siblings, and so there are a lot of things that played into the grief of that. And then, but I kind of consider that as one piece of my story, the grief and the adjusting. And then the latter part of my story comes when we were just fostering, just straight fostering. And that was easier for a lot of reasons. And I don't really know why. I've kind of tried to mull that over. What was the reason that season was easier? I think one, it was because we were fostering and not adopting. And there is a little bit of a difference in like, this is temporary. This is not forever. I can do anything for 6 months, a year, or, so it feels a little bit different in those terms. Maybe it's because I was a little bit older, I was a teenager, so maybe my perspective had changed. I don't know, but there were definitely some very different things. But that being said, as a teen, I still said, I am never doing this. I am never fostering. I am never adopting. I have paid my dues, if you will, right? Like I have served this population, and I'll become a social worker. That's how I can use my, my experience to continue helping kids, but absolutely not in my home. Obviously that didn't stick, but that's what I said as a teen. Yeah. And so I think that just tells you a little bit on like my journey, some of the feelings there that like I felt like it was important, but I also at the same time didn't want any part of it as an adult because I felt like I already knew the sacrifice, right? I knew that it was hard, and I knew the emotional toll and the emotional weight. And so that's a brief synopsis of my journey.
Okay, so let's talk about then what happened. I mean, you go from at times feeling replaced, invisible, and then you're telling yourself consciously, I've served my time.
Yeah.
in this space, and then something changes. I mean,
Mhm.
you grow up, and here you are now back in it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what happened?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things you can't see, right? Things that you can't measure. Along the way, there's healing and maybe miraculous healing because I was just so stone cold to the idea of ever fostering or adopting. I said, maybe I'll foster one day when like I have bio kids and they're grown, but I'm never adopting. I mean, it was a hard line in the sand, never crossing that kind of thing. But when I kind of jumped into the field of social work, I was working for a child placing agency and I was recruiting foster parents and training foster parents and constantly seeing the need. There's still kids that
Mm.
need homes. And my husband and I had been married for a couple of years. And so we didn't have any bio kids. And it was just kind of like, okay, why not me? Why, I would make a great foster parent. I've got so much experience, so much education. I would be a great foster parent. And so we can do this. And so we started small. We said, we'll take a couple of kiddos and then, you know how that works. One kiddo turned to 3 kiddos, turned to adoption, turned to a sibling, turned to another adoption. It just, it's how that works.
Multiplication.
Yeah. The factors
Foster
there.
care.
Yeah. So, I mean, it wasn't like, there was definitely a specific day I can remember calling my dad and I was crying, not in like a grief kind of crying, but in a, wow, I want to foster. And this is such a night and day change, from what
Wow.
it used to be.
Yeah, it's amazing how God can change our wants.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so for sharing like your experiences and your feelings. I know everything you said have resonated with me because of the kids I have in my care. I have 9 children, 6 still in the home, and we're still an active foster home. Our current placement right now, sometimes it's different, even like the age of the kiddo, but he's the age of 3 of my kids, like between 3 of my kids. He's a teenager. I've got teenagers in the home. And, a couple months in, he started calling me mom and my husband dad to them, not to us, but he'd be like, hey, what time is dad coming home? Or when is mom going to be back? Or, just questions like that. We didn't know it because we didn't hear it, but our kids, would talk to us in private and be like, hey, he's calling you guys mom and dad. And that bothers me. And
Yeah.
I'm thankful that we have trained them or they've been around us enough to know, like, hey, come to us when these hard feelings come up. We want to talk to you about those feelings and those thoughts you're having and help walk through with you. And that's something that you do too for foster and adoptive parents. You coach parents. And so what are some things that you specifically coach parents around through your social media and then also through the trainings that you do?
Yeah. So I have these, well, it's 5 currently, but I have a 6th training coming out in next year. And so those topics just relate to how do we support them kind of generally speaking, what are things in research that we know that, that are helpful? How do we help them navigate grief and loss? And because I have a therapy background, I pull a lot of tangible things as far as that goes, activities and whatnot. I also know that sometimes parents are concerned about like, how do I encourage a sibling relationship? Like, what about when my bio kid can't stand my, kids that are in care? How do we help them to do that? What about birth order? That's one from the very beginning, I think. I don't know if you guys get that question too. It's not just, how will this impact my bio kids, but also, what about birth order? Should I disrupt it? Am I supposed to keep it? And so about that too. Now, I don't specifically offer like coaching services to parents. So trainings is really the way that mostly happens, except for obviously in the play therapy space, there's a lot more working with families. But what we see in the research, and this is research done by Dr. Jana Hunsley, is that there's these things that pop up as predictive factors in the experiences of birth kids. So these make a difference, these predictive factors. They will predict kind of how bio kids view their experiences. And some of those are communication. How are parents communicating with their kids? Are they sharing enough information with them so that they can kind of understand and catch the vision, if you will, and know the why behind it? And that's ongoing communication from the beginning all the way throughout, transitions at the end, whatever it might look like. So communication is a huge thing for parents. One-on-one time, which that one seems obvious. I think we all know that this is important, but logistically, when you have 9 or 6 or 2 children, it can still be really challenging to find time for that. And so talking with parents around different ways then that one-on-one time can happen. And then one soapbox that I get on a lot is making sure that they have a voice, that bio kids have a voice, because we might say like, hey, do you want to foster? Hey, should we take another placement? Hey, should we adopt these kiddos? And if we ask our bio kids that and they say, no, I, I do not want to foster. No, I do not want them here longer than however long. And we say, thanks, we're going to go ahead and do this anyway. What does that say about the bio kid's voice, the power they have in their voice? It doesn't seem like it holds any agency. And so and I know it's a tricky place as parents, because I often give this example. If like my kid comes to me at breakfast and says, I want hot chocolate, a candy bar and cake and for breakfast, I'm like, absolutely not. I don't care what their voice said. They're not getting that for breakfast. It's not happening. And so I understand that there is this balance as parents, right? We can't give our kids everything or not give them these things. There's times where we have to be uncomfortable. We have to serve others. And yet, if we're giving them a voice, that voice should hold agency. So those are some of the things that I definitely talk with parents about. And that's on social media a lot too.
So I want to camp out here a little bit longer, and so I want you to go back and remember what you were sharing earlier about being a kid who felt invisible, who felt replaced, maybe felt like didn't have a voice. You have your parents now later on reflecting back and apologizing for things that you don't remember, and
Right.
take all that and then mash it up now with your adult, professionally trained brain. Are there like some questions that you could um, give adults right now? There are parents out there listening to this who have bio kids. Are there some questions that you think are applicable to virtually anybody who could say, ask your bio kids these questions that would be helpful for them?
Yeah. And I have like every month I send out a newsletter, if you will, and I include 4 different conversation starters in those every month.
Okay.
So sure, let me pull some out. I like to do ones that are fun too. So like teen ones, but also kid ones. And also keeping in mind, like it could be a question you ask, but it could also be draw a picture of. So it could be like, tell me about something you're really proud about our family for. Tell us something that you feel proud about our family. It could be draw a picture of what it's like when a new kid joins the family. Draw a picture of our family before we started fostering, and draw a picture of our family now.
Mm.
What's the hardest thing about our family? What's the best part about being part of our family? What's something you wish you could change about our family? I mean, I could honestly go on, but what was that, like 7 or so?
Yeah.
There's just so many things we could be asking our kids to check in with them, to just make it a safe space, because that's the other kicker. We can ask the questions all day long, but if we respond to them with either correction or kind of like, you shouldn't feel that way, and try to almost dissuade them from feeling that, then that actually is almost more harmful. We should have just not asked the question, because now we've created a place where the relationship isn't even safe to share those things. So that's the other piece of as a parent is, okay, if I'm asking these questions or inviting them to share with me about these certain things, then I need to be willing to hear whatever that answer
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so good. So yeah, go in with the idea of connecting and not correcting. I love that.
Definitely.
So along similar lines then, so not for parents, but you mentioned like as a kid, you meet your friends and they would talk to these foster siblings and then ignore you. So what advice would you have to say to others who are like kind of the next ring out of people who are listening and saying, hey, I'm not fostering, but I've got some family who does, I got some friends or neighbors who do. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, one of the like I said, one thing that shows up in the research is that bio kids often feel invisible. And again, that's not just home, that's often community and other things too. And so my plea for anybody, honestly, like my big hope long term for bio kids is that they are seen and supported. So the question then for that outer ring of people would be, how can you help bio kids to feel seen? Whether that's making sure you say hi to them, whether that's, if you're an organization that's maybe bringing a basket of things when a new kiddo is placed, can you throw something in there for bio kids? Like, I know when my biological brothers were born, people would bring balloons and stuff for my parents, but they also brought me like coloring things. And so how can we do that for bio kids in this setting as well, just to help them to feel seen and know that they're valuable? So those kinds of things. Also, I can remember growing up, we had a couple of families in our community who did invite us over and kind of let us have some special time. And I remember, being the oldest and having some of those privileges at their house and just getting to do just certain things. And they were people that were able to hear and listen because they did have a background in foster care and adoption. They had some relatives who had, so they really understood the hard and they felt safe. So being a safe person, seeing them where they're at, being able to hear the hard, and just not turning it into where their only identity is as a bio kid, because that's another thing too, is people who would ask me things as a kid would be, how's your sibling? What's it like having new kids in the home? And it stopped being about me and it became who I was because of them. And so that was a challenging thing too.
Great.
Oh, man, what a great insight. I love that. Yeah, just asking kids normal things about school and being a teenager or whatever it is,
Yeah.
dates and sports and music. Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah, I love it. Our foster kiddos often have like a CASA and then a GAL or a CFY, or they often have all these people around them. And I feel like sometimes other people don't realize that, right? They don't know that, yeah, they've got us and our friends and our church community or whatever it is, but then they also have all this other these layers of people. We had a friend over one time, one of my friends was over, and our at the time foster daughter came home. She was a teenager. She came home with her CASA, and CASA had taken her to ice skating and out for coffee, and they'd done all these fun things. And my friend was kind of listening, and eventually they left, and she kind of says, like, what does that make your kids feel when she walks in the door and has all this stuff? And I was like, that's a good question.
Mm.
And so she started to say, hey, would you let me know when she's going out with her CASA? Could I come pick up your teenage daughter and take her out for coffee at the same time and do something? And I was like, that was just so sweet that
What a
she
gift.
was able to recognize that in the moment. And I didn't have to even ask,
Yes. That's
Mhm.
such a gift. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So as foster parents, fostering's hard. It's hard physically, emotionally, socially, I would say, but also for our kids. Sometimes even more so for our kids because they don't have the adult brains that we have, like kind of mentioned. They don't have that to process through. And so they don't know how to process physically, emotionally, socially through all these changes. So how can we support them best through the grief and the loss as well? Because kids are coming and going, and sometimes they form those connections, and the next thing they know, they're gone. How can we
Yeah.
help them through that?
Yeah. Well, I always give the caveat, well, if you have concerns about your child, reach out to a professional near you. So that's one thing I always say, right? Like if you honestly have concerns, like this grief is too much for me, I don't know what to do, or they are having a really hard time adjusting, I am not sure how I can help them. Like I always encourage parents to find someone who's close to them, who's able to really help them through that. But as far as like grief and loss, there's this push pull because as parents we're experiencing probably some level of grief and loss, and even if it was like a really challenging placement, maybe it was a really hard season, there's still this level of loss that comes with that. And so it's this balance of allowing our kids to see us grieve if that is really authentic to how we're experiencing it, because if we're not grieving in front of them, then what does that communicate about those feelings of grief, and are they okay feelings to feel like when the first set of kids left our home, it was around Thanksgiving time. And so for the first time that I could ever remember, we went to a restaurant for Thanksgiving because it was just not within my parents' emotional ability to do the regular, right? To do the regular thing. And so just being okay with grieving as a parent is one thing. There's lots of tangible ideas. Like I said, I've got a training on grief and loss. So there's like some books. There's a book by Todd Parr called The Goodbye Book. And it's really great for younger kids. There's a fish that was in the tank, and then all of a sudden the fish isn't there. And so just talks around like, these are some of the ways you might feel. And a lot of books on grief are specific to death and dying. And so I've gone through to kind of look like, what are some of those that are not related to just death and dying? And this was one of those. It never explicitly talks about that because we know there's so much loss. There's anticipatory grief where we're fostering. We know that kids are going to leave our home, right? We know that's the goal of foster care. And so helping our kids to know from the very beginning, that's part of the why at the start of helping them to understand this is why we're doing it. And this is how it can look. And the plan is for them to go home, because if we don't prep them for the logistics of that, then that's going to blindside them completely. So that would be a really important thing as far as grief. And then, like I said, the anticipatory grief too, of realizing that they might anticipate that loss from the very beginning. And maybe that creates challenges where maybe you're seeing they're not wanting to connect with siblings, or they're not wanting to get too close, or whatever it might be, because they're afraid of this loss. Or even for us, when the kids left our home, there was this ambiguous loss because they were no longer, they're alive, they're out there somewhere, but they're no longer in contact with us. And so there was a lot of that we had. And going through that season, we tried, we did our best. Parents could maybe allow their kid to write a letter they wish they could send, or draw a picture they wish they could send, but obviously being really clear that it's not something you're actually able to give to them. But there's lots of tangible ideas like that, like having a day all about the kiddo that left the home. Like, did they love cheeseburgers and, hot chips for dinner? Have that for dinner, play their favorite game, do their favorite activity. So I just encourage parents to use play, especially with the younger kids, but even for teens, to help them to process whatever those feelings might be when kiddos leave, and just throughout the process.
That's so good.
It is good.
You mentioned a book, and you've written one yourself.
Yes.
Tell us about that. What's the title? Why'd you write it? What are your hopes for it?
Yeah. So my book is called The Day Lily Turned Uninvisible. This is obviously kind of playing on the fact that bio kids often feel invisible. And so it tells the story of a bio child in a foster family. And this is not the first placement the family has had. And I wanted to make that pretty clear that this isn't necessarily a kid who doesn't understand how the system works. She does, but there's something different about this placement. And so she is really excited. She's on board. She thinks this is important. And yet when this kiddo moves in, she's feeling invisible. Her friends are not playing tag with her anymore. Her parents aren't able to kind of participate in those nightly rhythms the same. Other people are looking at the things this kiddo in care is doing and applauding them and saying, oh, how helpful they are. And this bio child is thinking, I literally just did the same thing and you didn't say anything to me about it. And so she's feeling invisible. Like, why are people not noticing me? Maybe I've turned invisible, because this is a kid's book. So why would it not be comical like that? So she sees what she can do to turn herself uninvisible. And fortunately, she has a mom who is empathetic and attuned and notices that something's up here, and is able to provide that response of just like, oh my goodness, yes, I understand this is hurtful. That I could see that. Provide some insight that says, this is why, right? People aren't trying to hurt you. They're trying to be really welcoming. And then the mom is able to say, I saw you when you did these things. I saw when you sacrificed in this way. I saw when you, and so I've had some parents reach out to me and say, hey, my kid wants to know, why did the book end this way? We see kind of an upturn, things maybe seem a little more positive. Why did this happen? My kid wants to know. And I said, well, I left it open-ended on purpose. Did the parents reach out to their community and say, hey, my bio kid's feeling left out. Will you please acknowledge them too? Maybe parents did that. Maybe some of the newness wore off, having a new friend, new kiddo around. There's some new and excitedness, and maybe some of that has kind of faded away. Or maybe her perspective has changed a bit. Or maybe it's all three things. So that's this kind of the summary of my book. I wrote it because, there are some books out there that have been written for bio kids and foster families, not any quite from this perspective. I obviously used pieces of my story. This isn't actually my story. This isn't me, but I used pieces of my story and those feelings. There are a lot of feelings mentioned in the book, like a lot of feelings. And I did that on purpose too, to highlight some of the welcome feelings and the unwelcome feelings. And sometimes it doesn't feel okay. And I think even as foster adoptive parents, sometimes it doesn't feel okay to acknowledge, like, I'm feeling resentful today, or I'm feeling this today. And so to be able to name some of those feelings, and by naming them, say it's okay to feel them. So I wanted to make sure that that was displayed in the book as well. So the funny thing is, as I wrote the book and I started sending it to friends before I really put it with illustrations and everything, I was sending it to other professionals, not even professionals in foster care and adoption, not those who even know what it's like as a bio kid. But my responses I was getting back was, oh my goodness, that was so moving, I cried. And I'm like, what do you have to cry about? You don't even know what it's like as this child. But the way I wrote the book speaks to the feelings we all have at some point or another, of feeling invisible, of when a new person comes to the office and they're like the life of the party, going, man, okay, well, I'm not very funny anymore or whatever. So we all have these seasons in our life where we can look back and think, I remember when I felt that way too. And so I think that's why the book doesn't just resonate with people who are in the foster care and adoption space. It resonates with people across the board because we all know what that's like, to feel like we're forgotten or like people don't quite see us.
Daniela, any final thought?
I don't think so. No.
We got them all.
Yeah, I appreciate when, spaces give birth kids a voice. And I will say sometimes, like, if you look for birth kids who are resentful and angry, you're going to find them. And if you look for birth kids who only have positive things to say, you're going to find them. I was talking to a friend recently joking, like, where are those positive kids? But honestly, those are the ones sometimes we see, like, saying, like, yeah, you should foster, do it. It's so great. It's not, and it is great. And your kids may be quote unquote fine, but know that there's this hard balance. And so that's what I try really hard to do, is to be the balance between, I am not resentful and things were hard, and I am thankful for my life and things were hard, right? And so that's one, I'm just so thankful for you all giving the space to help families to understand what it's like to be a birth kid and give birth kids a voice, because it helps them to feel seen, and then therefore helps them to be supported and creates healthier foster families. And that means healthier families for kids who are in care. And so it does impact the entire system if we're making sure that the entire foster family is healthy and well.
Thank you so much I've loved this interview, and it's so important. And there are a lot of people who do feel unseen. So even if you're not a foster parent, you might want to get this book. Thank you so much. It has been great having you, learning from you.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. Again, I hope you enjoyed this podcast that are now turned into a webinar, Understanding Your Permanent Kids' Needs, with Eli, Ayla, and Daniela. Again, just wanted to remind you that this is part of a webinar series. So there are a lot more at FosterCon.org. And we also have 2 more coming up, Understanding Cultural Differences and Transracial Adoption. That is coming up on 12/2. And then Understanding Reunification is a bonus webinar that we did not have scheduled, but have decided again to pull from our podcast, some great podcast episodes that we have done, pull it together to make a webinar, and probably more of those coming, as we have found this a great way to utilize the content we have on our podcast as well. So check out the complete series and even our previous series on fostercon.org if you've not already listened to them and watched them. Again, it takes a lot of time and resources to create things like this. So if you love what we do, if you want to help fund our mission, we would be forever grateful. You can go to americaskidsbelong.org. You can choose donate. Scan this code right now on your screen. I also want to add that it's just really helpful when you share these with other people. So go to your licensing agency and you can tell them, hey, did you guys know that America's Kids Belong has these webinars that we can use? Tell your friends, tell your fostering friends, your adoptive friends. It just really helps get the word out and helps us be able to continue to do this the more viewers and listeners we have. And then if you are here for CE credit, if you need that credit, that certificate of credit for 1.5 or 1 hours, or different time periods that we kind of do our webinars, you can find the form at fostercon.org. You will need to fill out a form for every webinar that you watch, and you also need to fill out a form individually. So if you are with a partner or spouse, you will both have to fill out the form. And lastly, I just want to remind you again, we have a lot of great resources at America's Kids Belong. We have FosterCon, which is part of this webinar series. We have our Foster Friendly podcast, which is how this content came to be today. And then Fostering Front Door is our newest thing that we have. It is an online amazing catalog, database, resource library full of everything you need to know, whether you're interested in fostering, you're already fostering and you need support, or you're interested in adoption through foster care. So use it, tell other people about it. We provide all this content for free because we believe in changing the experiences and outcomes for kids in care. So enjoy your day.